It was past midnight when the phone rang. My younger son, Eli, he's a doctor, was whispering, "Mom, don't scream when you see him." I drove through the storm to the parking lot behind Ether General. Headlights cut through the rain, and then someone stepped out from the shadows. My heart stopped. It was Daniel, my firstborn, the same son I buried a year ago. I didn't know if I was losing my mind, or if the dead had found a way back. If this moment made your heart skip too, hit subscribe, share this story, and tell me in the comments, what would you do if the person you buried came back? Rain slammed against the windshield like 1,000 tiny fists, and for a moment, I thought the thunder outside was my own heartbeat. My phone lit up, 12:17 a.m. Eli's name flashing across the screen. My youngest, a doctor. The good one, the one who always called to check if I'd taken my meds. "Mom," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Whatever happens tonight, don't scream when you see him." I sat up straight. See who? But the line went dead. I remember grabbing my coat without even locking the door. The street was slick with rain, the world silent except for the storm and the sound of my car engine struggling to start. Seattle rain always had this heavy, suffocating smell, wet asphalt, and regret. By the time I reached the back parking lot of Ether General Hospital, I could barely see through the downpour. The lights flickered over puddles that looked like shattered mirrors. I parked near the dumpsters, the way Eli had told me. "No one should see me there," he said. "No one should know." He was standing by a car, soaked to the bone, eyes darting everywhere. He looked terrified, like he'd seen a ghost. "Eli!" I called out, stepping out into the rain. My voice barely carried over the wind. "What's going on? Why are we—" He raised his hand fast, cutting me off. "Mom, please, before you look inside that car, promise me you won't scream." Something in the way he said it made my stomach twist. My feet suddenly felt heavy, like I was walking through wet cement. "Eli, what are you talking about? You're scaring me." He looked at me, eyes full of something I hadn't seen since he was little. Guilt. "Just promise." I nodded, even though every nerve in my body told me to run. He opened the car door. There was a man sitting inside, his face hidden in the dark, but I could see his hands, trembling, pale, scarred. And I knew those hands. I'd held them through fevers, through heartbreak, through his last breath a year ago. "Daniel?" My voice cracked on his name. The man lifted his head slowly, and even through the dim light, even through the impossible, it was him, my firstborn, my son. I felt the world tilt, the ground disappeared beneath me. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. The air froze in my throat. Eli whispered, "He didn't die, Mom. He couldn't. They tried to kill him." I stumbled backward, my heels slipping in the mud. No, I buried him. I saw him. We had the funeral. Mom. Daniel's voice was rough, like gravel. I had to disappear. My knees buckled. Eli caught me before I hit the ground. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Every memory of the past year, the flowers, the gravestone, the cold morning sitting by his grave, all shattered in a single heartbeat. I couldn't stop staring at him. He looked thinner, older, haunted, a scar cut across his temple. I reached out a trembling hand, afraid he'd vanish if I touched him. "Daniel, what did they do to you?" He didn't answer. He just looked at Eli, and something unspoken passed between them. I realized then that they'd both been living with a secret I wasn't supposed to know. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to slap him, hug him, scream, everything, all at once. But all I could do was whisper, "I can't lose you again." The rain was coming down harder, like the sky wanted to drown the truth before it could spread. Behind us, a car door slammed. A shadow moved near the hospital loading dock. Daniel's head snapped up. His voice dropped to a whisper. "They know I'm here." Eli grabbed my hand, guiding me toward the car. "We have to go. Now!" My mind couldn't keep up. A year of grief, undone in a single night. My son alive. My other son terrified. Something bigger than all of us closing in. I looked at Daniel again. He was shivering, eyes wild, but he still managed to smile. That same crooked smile I thought I'd never see again. "It's okay, Mom. I'll explain everything. Just trust me this time." I wanted to believe him, but all I could think was, if he was alive, then what had I buried? Thunder cracked so loud I almost jumped out of my skin. Eli turned the key, and the car roared to life. As we pulled away, I looked back through the rain-blurred glass. Daniel was still there, standing in the shadows, watching. Something about the way he looked at me, like he knew this was only the beginning, made my chest tighten. That night didn't just bring my son back. It brought everything I thought I'd buried: fear, hope, and the one truth I never wanted to face. The dead don't always stay dead, and if they come back, it's never without a reason. The rain hadn't stopped all night. It was still there in the morning, quiet, cold, like the sky had forgotten how to do anything else. I sat at my kitchen table with a towel around my shoulders, watching the steam rise from a cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face again. Daniel, standing there in the rain, breathing, alive, alive. How do you wrap your mind around that? How do you mourn someone, bury them, speak at their funeral, and then find out it was all a lie? The smell of lilies flashed through my head. That funeral smell, sweet and heavy. I remembered standing over his casket a year ago, my umbrella turning inside out in the wind. I'd whispered to him, "You can rest now, honey. I'll take it from here." Now here he was, resting nowhere, breathing, watching me break all over again. When I saw him that night, I nearly collapsed. He caught me before I hit the ground. I could feel the warmth in his hands, the pulse under his skin. Proof that this wasn't a dream. "I had to disappear," he said quietly. His voice cracked like he'd practiced that line 100 times in his head. I pulled away, searching his eyes for the son I lost. But what I saw wasn't Daniel. Not the boy who fixed my fence or stayed up late baking cookies with his brother. This man was different, haunted, edges sharper, eyes older. "You let me mourn you," I whispered. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "You stood there and watched me die a little every day. Didn't you?" He didn't answer. That silence burned worse than the lie. Eli tried to calm me down, but I couldn't look at either of them. I just kept pacing the kitchen, clutching my robe tight. My whole life, I taught my boys that the truth was sacred. You could lose everything, but not your honesty. And now, both of them were standing there, lying by omission, like it was some kind of kindness. Daniel finally spoke. "Mom, I didn't want this. None of it." "Then what did you want?" I snapped. "You wanted me to bury an empty box? To spend a year talking to a grave that didn't even have you in it?" He took a deep breath. "If I told you the truth back then, you'd be in danger too." Danger. That word hung in the air. It sounded like something out of someone else's life, not mine. I was a retired biology teacher, for God's sake. I paid my taxes on time. I had a cat that didn't even like me. Danger was something you watched on the news, not something that sat at your kitchen table, dripping rainwater onto the floor. I had to protect you, he said again. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But all I could think about was that funeral, the casket, the rain, the priest's voice echoing over the sound of thunder. I'd built an entire year of grief around that day. I'd learned to live with it. And now he'd ripped it away like it meant nothing. My chest ached. My hands were trembling so hard I had to grab the counter. The coffee I'd poured hours ago had gone cold. I took one sip, and it tasted like metal. Eli was watching me carefully, like he was afraid I might break for real this time. "Mom," he said softly, "there's more you need to know." I didn't want to know. I wanted to go back to not knowing. Ignorance had been peaceful. Instead, I just sat there, staring at the wall where Daniel's photo still hung, framed, with a black ribbon tied across the corner. I remembered how proud I'd been to hang it there, how I'd lit a candle beneath it every night before bed. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. "You had a year. A whole year." Daniel's eyes filled with something I couldn't name. Guilt, maybe? Or shame. Because it wasn't safe. And because I didn't think I deserved you anymore. That broke something in me. I wanted to be angry, to scream, to throw something. But the truth was, even through the rage and confusion, the mother in me still wanted to pull him close and make sure he'd eaten, make sure he'd slept. That instinct never dies. I sat back down, rubbing my hands together, trying to stop the shaking. The room felt too small, too bright. Every tick of the clock sounded louder than before. Finally, I looked up. "You can't disappear again," I said. "Not after this." He nodded. "I won't, I promise." But the way he said it, soft, uncertain, told me promises didn't mean what they used to. I thought of the headstone still sitting out at St. Mary's Cemetery, the flowers I'd left, the prayers I'd whispered. And I realized, if the world could lie to me once, it could do it again. That's when the fear settled in. The kind that doesn't scream, doesn't shout. The kind that sits quietly behind your ribs and whispers, "You're going to lose him again." The sun hadn't come up yet, but I knew I wouldn't sleep. I stared into that cold cup of coffee until the reflection of my face started to blur. My whole life, I thought I understood what it meant to lose someone. Turns out I'd only learned half the lesson. Because losing someone once is grief. Losing them twice, that's hell. The next morning, Daniel sat across from me at the kitchen table. The sun was just beginning to rise, slicing through the blinds in thin, cold lines. My coffee had gone cold again. It always did these days. He hadn't said much since last night, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted him to. But then he finally looked up and said, "Mom, there's something you need to know about Ether Labs." The name hit me like a ghost. Everyone in Seattle knew Ether. The smiling ads on TV, the miracle drugs, the promises of hope. Daniel used to work for them, right before his accident. My heart started to beat faster. "They're not what they say they are," he said. "Not even close." I wanted to stop him, tell him to rest, to eat something, to just let me breathe for one damn second. But the way he said it, the crack in his voice, made me lean in. He told me about the trials, how he'd helped design a new medication, one meant to treat autoimmune disease, how the tests had gone wrong, people had died, quietly, without headlines, and how Ether Labs had covered it up. They made me sign non-disclosures, Mom, he said. They changed the reports, paid off families, buried the data. I tried to go to the authorities, but his voice trailed off. But what? I whispered. He rubbed his temples. They made it look like an accident. They said if I didn't disappear, they'd go after you and Eli. That's why I let you believe I was dead. I just sat there, staring. The air between us felt thick, like the whole room was made of glass, and one wrong word would shatter it. You let me bury you, I said, quietly. You let me stand over your grave. He looked down. If I stayed alive, you'd have buried more than that. The words stung. I wanted to scream, but all I could manage was a whisper. How long have you been living like this? A year, he said. I've been hiding in Oregon, working under a fake name. But now someone's found me. That's why Eli called you last night. We don't have much time. I could barely process it all. The lies, the danger, the idea that my own son was hunted because he'd tried to do the right thing. Then he mentioned her. Lila Stone, he said. She was a nurse at Ether. We worked together. She saved copies of the test data, the ones they thought they'd erased. She still has them in the hospital archive. If we can get those files, we can prove everything. I blinked. You mean, go back to the hospital? After everything? He nodded. It's the only way. The thought of stepping back into that place, the same halls where I'd once walked to identify his body, made my stomach twist. But when he looked at me, eyes red, trembling hands clasped together like a child asking for permission, I knew I'd already made my choice. So that night, I drove him and Eli back to Ether General. The parking lot looked different in daylight. Too normal, too calm. But my hands on the steering wheel wouldn't stop shaking. We parked near the service entrance. Eli swiped his badge and led us in through a maintenance corridor. The smell of disinfectant hit hard, mixing with the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. Every step echoed. Daniel whispered, "The files are on a restricted drive in the lower wing. If Lila's right, the access terminal is still live." We turned a corner and nearly froze. 2 security guards passed by, chatting about the Mariners game. I pressed myself against the wall, holding my breath until their voices faded. My heart was pounding so loud I thought they'd hear it. I glanced at Daniel. He was pale, sweat on his forehead. That same fear was back in his eyes, the kind that comes from knowing death has a memory. Eli tapped his tablet, pulling up a schematic. We have 3 minutes before the next patrol. We moved fast, down a narrow hall, through a metal door that hissed when it opened. Inside, rows of old monitors, dusty equipment, blinking red lights. The hum of servers filled the air like a low growl. Daniel sat down at one of the terminals. Okay. It's still here, he muttered. His fingers flew over the keyboard. Lines of data scrolled past on the screen. Patient IDs, test results, timestamps. Then his face went white. Oh my God. They knew. They knew before the drug went public. I stepped closer. On the monitor was a report stamped with Ether's logo and a list of deaths marked unrelated. How many? I asked. 32. He swallowed hard. 32 people, and they buried everyone. I covered my mouth, trying not to cry. We have to show someone. That's the plan, he said. But if we take this now, they'll know it's gone. We need to copy it quietly. Eli plugged in a flash drive, his hands steady in a way mine weren't. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 10%, 40%, 72%. Then, footsteps. Someone's coming, Daniel hissed. I turned toward the door. A flashlight beam swept across the hallway outside. Eli yanked out the drive, handed it to Daniel. Go, Mom, with me. We ducked behind the server racks just as the door opened. A guard stepped in, scanning the room. My breath caught. The air felt too heavy to breathe. After a few seconds, that felt like hours. He shrugged and left. The door clicked shut again. Daniel exhaled shakily. That was too close. Eli looked at the flash drive, then at me. We got it. But they'll notice soon. I stared at the little piece of metal in Daniel's hand. The weight of 32 lost lives sitting right there between his fingers. And for the first time, I felt something shift inside me. Fear, yes, but also anger. Real, raw anger. Driving home, I couldn't stop thinking about one question that wouldn't leave me alone. If telling the truth could kill my son? Should I keep it hidden? I didn't have an answer, not yet, but I knew this. Whatever Ether Labs had buried, it was time someone dug it up. The house was quiet that night, too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear things that aren't there. Every tick of the clock sounded like a countdown. Daniel was in the basement, hidden behind the old shelves I used to store Christmas boxes. Eli had sealed the trapdoor with an old rug. We thought we were safe. Then came the knock, not a soft one, a firm, deliberate one. The kind of knock that says, "We know you're home." I froze. Daniel heard it too. I could hear his breath quicken from below. One more knock, louder this time. Eli's eyes met mine. I opened the door. Just a crack. A man stood there. Detective Rourke. Broad shoulders, sharp jaw. A look that could cut through walls. I'd seen him before, back when they ruled Daniel's death an accident. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, calm but curious. "Sorry to bother you this late. Mind if I come in?" Every nerve in my body screamed, no. But I forced a smile. "Of course, Detective. Is something wrong?" He stepped inside, dripping rainwater onto the mat. His eyes scanned the room, every picture frame, every shadow. "You've got a lovely home," he said. "Mind if I ask, were you at Ether General today?" My heart skipped. Eli's hand tightened around his mug. I could feel Daniel's fear radiating through the floorboards. I swallowed. "Ether? No, why?" "Routine security check," he said. "We got footage of a woman matching your description entering a restricted wing. Thought I'd stop by before writing it off." He smiled, but there was something behind it. Suspicion. I felt my throat close up. "Oh," I said softly, pretending to laugh. "I visit the hospital often. My younger son works there." Maybe it was that. Rourke tilted his head, studying me like I was a math problem he'd already solved. Sure, must be that. He took a slow walk around my living room. Every creak of the floor made my pulse jump. "You've been through a lot, Mrs. Hayes," he said. "Losing Daniel?" "I can't imagine." I nodded. No mother should have to bury her child. "True." He paused. "But it must have been hard, letting go like that, especially when you didn't get to see the body yourself." I froze. He was fishing, and I was taking the bait. "I saw what I needed to see," I said. He smiled faintly, like a man who'd just heard a confession. "You're a good mother," he said. "Most would cling to hope. Tell themselves, maybe? He's still out there." My chest tightened. "Hope," I whispered. "Can be dangerous." Down in the basement, I heard something. A faint thump like a shoe bumping against a box. Rourke's head turned slightly. My blood ran cold. I coughed loudly, stepping between him and the hallway. "Would you like some coffee, detective?" He smiled again, polite but sharp. "No, thank you. I should get going." He reached into his pocket and handed me a card. "If you hear anything unusual, call me, day or night." I nodded, clutching the card so hard it crumpled. Of course. He looked at me one last time before leaving. "Grief makes people do strange things, Mrs. Hayes. Just be careful." When the door finally shut, my knees almost gave out. I leaned against it, shaking. The air felt thick, heavy, like I couldn't pull it into my lungs. Eli was the first to move. He locked the door, pulled the curtain tight. "Mom," he whispered. He knows. I didn't answer. I just stood there, staring at the door, listening to the sound of Rourke's car fading away. Then slowly, I walked to the basement. Daniel was sitting on the floor, pale, eyes wide. Did he see me? I shook my head. No. But he's not done. He buried his face in his hands. "I told you this would happen. I should have never come back." I knelt down beside him. "Don't you dare say that. You didn't come back to die again. You came back to finish what they started." He looked up, his voice breaking. "If they find me, Mom, it's over. For all of us." I cupped his face in my hands, the same way I used to when he was a boy. "Then, they won't find you." He shook his head. "You can't lie for me, not to them." I smiled sadly. "Watch me." He opened his mouth to protest, but I put a finger to his lips. "Don't make me bury you again." For a moment, everything stopped. The rain, the wind, even the fear. He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. When I went back upstairs, I stood in the dark living room and stared at the closed door. The truth felt like a loaded gun in my hand. Dangerous, heavy, impossible to hold forever. But for now, the lie was the only shield I had left. Sometimes, justice doesn't start with the truth. Sometimes, it starts with the courage to lie. For the right reason, for the right person, just long enough to make the truth survive. And as I listened to Daniel's soft breathing below the floorboards, I whispered to myself, "God help me." Because tonight, I became a liar. The news hit us before sunrise. Lila Stone was gone, arrested. They said it was for data theft, but Daniel and I both knew what that really meant. Ether Labs had found their leak. Daniel paced the living room like a trapped animal, hands pulling at his hair. "We have to leave, Mom. They know she worked with me. It's only a matter of time before they come here." I stood by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. I'd spent months terrified of losing him again. Now it felt inevitable. "Running won't fix this," I said quietly. He turned to me, eyes wild. "You don't get it. These people don't stop. They made my death look real. They'll do worse if they have to." "And what then?" I asked. "You vanish again? You live your life in the dark while they bury 32 families under lies." He didn't answer, just slammed his fist against the wall. "You think I haven't tried to fix it? I did everything right, and they still won." I walked over and touched his shoulder. "Then maybe it's time someone else tried." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I'm going there," I said. "To Ether, to the top." He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "You can't just walk into that building and—" "I'm not asking permission," I interrupted. "I'm his mother. Let them look me in the eye while they pretend they don't know what they did." He shook his head. "Mom, you don't understand who you're dealing with." I smiled faintly. "I've dealt with death. That's enough." An hour later, I stood in front of Ether's glass tower, The reflection of the city shimmered across its surface like oil. Inside, people in suits walked past me without a glance. I could feel Daniel's old sneakers on my feet, worn, faded, the same pair I'd kept after his funeral. Somehow, it felt right to wear them. At the front desk, the receptionist looked up. "Do you have an appointment?" "Yes," I lied smoothly. "With Dr. Callan Frost. Tell him it's about Daniel Hayes." Her expression flickered. Recognition. She made a call, whispered something, then nodded toward the elevator. "He'll see you." The ride up was silent except for the hum of the cables. I caught my reflection in the mirrored doors. A tired woman in her 60s, clutching a purse like it was armor. When the doors opened, Frost was waiting. He looked exactly like the kind of man who'd never been told no. Immaculate suit, calm smile, eyes colder than marble. "Mrs. Hayes," he said warmly, "please come in." His office was all glass and air, a view of the city that felt more like surveillance than scenery. I didn't sit. "You know why I'm here," I said. He smiled. "I can assume, but I'd rather hear it from you." I took a deep breath. "You buried the truth with my son." His smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened. "You're mistaking tragedy for conspiracy. Your son's accident was unfortunate, but—" "Don't," I snapped. "Don't use that word. He didn't die in an accident." He was silenced. Frost tilted his head. "That's a serious accusation. So is murder." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "Do you know what it's like to manage something as large as ether? Every decision we make affects millions. And sometimes, yes, there are side effects. Collateral damage." "Collateral?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "You're talking about human lives." He shrugged. "I'm talking about progress." I took a step closer. "Progress doesn't need to kill 32 people and call it research." Frost sighed, almost pitying. "You sound like your son, idealistic, emotional. He never understood that truth is a luxury. People don't want it. They want results." I stared at him. "You think truth is a luxury?" He smiled again, thinly. "For people like me, it is." Something in me snapped. "Then you don't deserve to have it." We stood there, silent, the city lights flickering behind him. For a moment, I saw the man my son had once feared. Not a monster, but a man who'd convinced himself he wasn't one. "You should go home, Mrs. Hayes," Frost said finally. "You've been through enough. Let your son rest in peace." I turned to leave, but paused at the door. "He's not the one who needs rest," I said softly. "It's your conscience that should be buried." As I stepped into the elevator, I could feel his eyes on me the whole way down. By the time I reached the lobby, I knew I'd just declared war on Ether Labs. That night, I caught a glimpse of a black sedan parked across the street. The same car followed me to the grocery store the next morning. Frost had made his move, but fear had changed shape in me. It wasn't something that froze me anymore. It burned. When Daniel asked if I was okay, I told him the truth. "No. But I'm not scared of them anymore." He frowned. "You should be." I looked at him, the son they'd tried to erase, and said, "No, they should be." The night before it happened, I didn't sleep. I just sat there at the kitchen table, the glow of the fridge light washing over the room, Daniel's old sneakers by the door, the ones I'd worn to Ether. They were still damp from the rain. Every time I looked at them, I heard Frost's voice again, cold, polite, untouchable. "You sound like your son," he'd said. That was the moment I knew I couldn't just wait for justice. I had to take it. By dawn, I had a plan. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even safe. But it was something. I borrowed one of Eli's spare ID badges, the kind that opened the staff elevators. Then I found an old blazer, some glasses, and tied my hair up tight. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't look like a mother anymore. I looked like someone who had nothing left to lose. When I got to Ether, the lobby was crowded. People on phones, talking fast, moving faster. I walked straight through like I belonged there. No one stopped me. The badge blinked green when I tapped it against the elevator panel. For a second, I thought maybe the universe was on my side. The top floor smelled like money and bleach. I could hear the faint hum of security cameras shifting. Every step I took sounded louder than it should have. My hands wouldn't stop sweating. I kept hearing Daniel's voice in my head. "Mom, you're not young enough to run anymore." He was right. But I wasn't there to run. I was there to finish this. The data vault was in a restricted wing behind the legal department. Ironic, really. I slipped in when two employees exited with their coffee cups, holding the door like I was supposed to be there. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Rows of locked drawers and screens glowed in the dim light. I found a terminal marked Archive01 and slid the flash drive Daniel had given me into the port. The monitor flickered, then came alive. Hundreds of files appeared. Patient names, trial dates, fatality logs. And there it was, the one marked Project D27. I opened it. The screen filled with lines of text, internal memos, signatures, emails. Then a video thumbnail appeared. My fingers trembled as I clicked play. A conference room, Frost at the head of the table. Doctors in white coats around him. One of them spoke. "Sir, 3 subjects died within 48 hours. We need to stop the trials." Frost leaned forward, voice calm. "We can't. If we pause, the investors will pull out. Adjust the reports." Another doctor protested. "That's falsifying data." Frost cut him off. "We're not falsifying. We're preserving the bigger picture. Progress requires sacrifice." The room went silent. I covered my mouth. For a long moment, I couldn't move. I wasn't just watching corruption. I was watching the reason my son had to fake his death. I copied everything. The bar on the flash drive crept forward, agonizingly slow. 32%, 67%, 91%. Complete. I yanked it out and shoved it into my coat pocket. That's when I heard footsteps. "Excuse me, ma'am." My blood turned to ice. A guard stood in the doorway, tall, armed, looking right at me. "Can I see your ID?" I smiled. Or tried to. Of course. I held up Eli's badge. Legal department. I was just retrieving a file for Dr. Frost. He frowned. "At 6:30 in the morning?" My throat tightened. I took a breath and steadied my voice. "When you work for a man like Frost, time's a suggestion." He didn't laugh. He took a step closer. "I'm gonna need you to come with me." My mind raced. The walls felt like they were closing in. My pulse was in my ears. And then I did something stupid. I started talking, not like an intruder, but like a mother, like someone who'd already lost too much to be afraid. "You ever think about what truth means?" I asked softly, "whether it's worth keeping alive?" The guard hesitated, clearly thrown off. "Because I used to think truth was about being right," I said, taking a step closer. "Now I know it's about being human. If we destroy it, we destroy ourselves." He blinked, unsure what to say. "Ma'am." "Dr. Frost wants to destroy it," I said. "He's afraid of it. That's why he hides behind people like you." He shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I don't know anything about that." "I bet you don't," I said, forcing a sad smile. People like him make sure you never do. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then his radio crackled, someone calling for backup on another floor. He sighed, hesitated, then said quietly, "You should go." Now. I didn't wait for him to change his mind. I slipped past him, heart hammering, and headed for the stairwell. Every step echoed like thunder. By the time I reached the parking lot, the morning sun was cutting through the clouds. My legs felt weak, my chest on fire. I got into the car, locked the doors, and let out a shaky laugh that turned into tears. I pulled out the flash drive, stared at it, and whispered, "You did it, Daniel. You were right." But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Frost wouldn't stop until every copy of that file was gone. He'd come for Daniel next. Still, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the fight ahead, because now I had something he didn't. Proof. And proof, once seen, can't be buried again. The storm came back the night everything ended, loud, restless, almost like the sky itself was warning me. I drove faster than I should have, wipers barely keeping up with the rain. Daniel had called me once, his voice shaking. "Mom, they found me." Then the line went dead. When I reached the cabin, the lights were out, just the sound of rain slamming the windows and the wind dragging branches across the roof. I pushed open the door and froze. Frost was already there. 3 men in black suits, guns, and Daniel, standing in the corner, hands raised. He looked smaller than I remembered, soaked, exhausted, defeated. Frost smiled when he saw me. "Mrs. Hayes," he said calmly, "you've caused quite a mess." I took a step forward. "Where's your proof? You have nothing." "Oh, I have enough," he said. "What I want is the original file, the one your son stole." I shook my head. "I don't have it." He smiled wider, like a wolf playing with its prey. "You're lying. You've been lying since the day you walked into my building." Daniel's eyes darted to me. "Mom, just give it to him." "No," I said sharply. "Please," he whispered. "It's not worth it. I can't let them hurt you." Frost turned toward him. "That's very noble, Daniel. But the truth is..." He raised his hand, signaling his men to move. "Someone always gets hurt." I stepped in front of my son. My heart was beating so loud I thought they could hear it. "You shoot him," I said, "and you'll never find it." Frost paused. "You're bluffing." I smiled. A small, bitter smile I didn't even know I had left. "You've spent your whole life underestimating people who don't have power. You should know by now that's how revolutions start." His expression hardened. "Give me the drive, Mrs. Hayes," Daniel suddenly shouted. "Stop! I'll do it." He stepped forward, soaked to the bone, his voice cracking. "If I surrender, let her go." I turned to him, horrified. "Don't you dare!" He looked at me, tears mixing with the rain. "I can't let you die for me again." For a moment, time froze, the lightning outside flashing through the broken window, illuminating his face. The boy I raised, the man they tried to destroy. Then I said the only thing a mother could. "If you surrender, they'll bury the truth again." Frost's hand twitched. "Enough." He motioned to his men. One of them raised his gun. And something inside me broke. "I can't lose him twice!" I screamed. Everything happened at once. The thunder crashed, the lights flickered, and I threw the small silver USB drive onto the floor. Frost's eyes followed it like a hawk. "Get it!" he barked. While his men scrambled, Daniel grabbed my arm. "Mom, run!" I whispered. "Now!" He hesitated for half a second, then bolted toward the back door. Frost turned too late. He snatched up the USB and held it in triumph. You should have learned, Mrs. Hayes. Lies never win. I met his gaze and said softly, neither does arrogance. The gunshot echoed through the cabin, not at me, but at the power box. The lights exploded into darkness. For a moment, only the storm spoke. By the time the lights flickered back, Frost was standing in the middle of the room, drenched, furious, clutching the fake USB. I smiled faintly. You really think I'd bring the real one here? He froze. The realization hit him too late. Enjoy your empty files, I said. The truth's already out of your reach. Sirens wailed in the distance, faint but growing. Frost looked out the window and saw the flashing red and blue cutting through the rain. He turned back to me, face pale. You sent it? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He lunged forward, grabbing me by the collar. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yes, I said. I just made sure the world finally knows what kind of monster you are. He shoved me back, but I didn't fall. I stood there, shaking but unbroken. He stared at me for a long moment, then stormed out into the rain. His car roared away, headlights vanishing into the storm. When I stepped outside, Daniel was waiting by the tree line, shivering. The look in his eyes, part fear, part disbelief, will stay with me forever. You did it, he said, quietly. I walked up and cupped his face in my hands. No, I said. We did. He started to cry, not loud, not dramatic, just that quiet, broken kind of crying that sounds like breathing through pain. I pulled him into my arms. You let me mourn you, I whispered, my voice trembling. But I'll never stop fighting for you. The rain washed the blood and mud from his hands. Lightning struck somewhere far away. We stood there for a long time, not saying a word, just holding on to what was left of each other. The world could call it justice, revenge, whatever it wanted. For me, it was something simpler. A promise kept. That night, I realized something I'd been too afraid to admit. Truth doesn't always save us. Sometimes it just refuses to die quietly. For 2 days, the world was quiet. Too quiet. No calls, no knocks at the door, no sign of Frost or his men. Just rain and silence, and the feeling that the storm had only paused to catch its breath. Then one morning, my laptop buzzed to life. A message flashed across the screen. No name, just an attachment. The sender's initials, LS. My heart stopped. Lila. She was alive. I opened the file, and there it was. The footage I'd stolen from Ether's vault, now edited, time-stamped, and ready to burn the whole company to the ground. I didn't ask how she'd made it out, or where she was hiding. She'd done what she promised. Within hours, the video hit every major network. Headlines exploded across screens. Ether Labs under federal investigation. Whistleblower footage reveals doctoring of drug trial results. CEO Callan Frost faces criminal charges. I sat at the kitchen table, hands trembling around my coffee cup, watching the anchors speak my son's name. Daniel Hayes. Not as a fugitive, not as a dead man, but as the man who exposed the truth. He came out of hiding that afternoon, walked straight into the police station with the flash drive in his hand. I'm ready to testify, he told them. I thought I'd be angry, scared, maybe. But when I saw him walk through those glass doors, shoulders squared, head high, I felt something else entirely. Pride, the kind that hurts, because it's stitched together with loss and love and years you'll never get back. A week later, the trial went public. Frost appeared on screen, calm and smug, just like always. The prosecutors read the evidence, the doctored reports, the patient deaths, the video of his boardroom orders. His lawyers called it taken out of context, but truth doesn't need context. It just needs air. Then it was my turn to testify. They patched me in from home. I wasn't strong enough to travel. I remember the first question. Mrs. Hayes, why did you get involved? I looked into the camera and said, because the truth buried my son once. I wasn't going to let it bury him again. The courtroom went silent. Even Frost didn't move. They played the clip, my son's voice from one of his recordings. If this gets out, they'll come for me. But if it doesn't, I'll never forgive myself. I couldn't breathe listening to it. All I could think was, he knew. He knew this would happen. And he did it anyway. By the end of the week, Frost was indicted for fraud, obstruction, and negligent homicide. His empire collapsed in a single headline. The night the verdict came in, Daniel sat beside me on the porch. The air was still wet from the rain. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then he said softly, "You saved me, Mom." I shook my head. "No, you saved yourself. I just stopped standing in the way." He laughed, the first real laugh I'd heard from him in years. "You think you're not the hero here?" I smiled. Heroes are overrated. I'm just a mother who got tired of being afraid. We watched the sun rise, quiet and golden, the world finally slowing down. The truth was out there now, unstoppable, untamable. And for once, it wasn't our secret to carry anymore. Somewhere, I imagined Lila watching the same sunrise from a different city. Maybe she was smiling too. Maybe she'd finally stopped running. When I turned to Daniel, he looked lighter, like the weight of the grave had finally lifted from his shoulders. "You know what's funny?" I said. "They thought killing the truth would protect them. But truth doesn't die. It just waits for someone brave enough to dig it up." He nodded, eyes glistening. "You mean someone like you?" We sat there until the sky turned blue, the sound of distant sirens fading into birdsong. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Not the quiet kind that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from knowing the world finally sees what you've been screaming all along. Justice doesn't erase pain. It doesn't fix the years lost or bring back the people gone. But it makes the world stop pretending it didn't happen. And sometimes, that's enough. It had been a year since everything happened. The storms had stopped, both outside and inside. The house finally felt like a home again. Not a hiding place, not a battleground, just home. That evening, I set the table myself. 4 plates. Daniel brought the wine. Eli made his awful mashed potatoes. And Lila, yes, Lila, showed up late, carrying a pie like nothing had ever happened. For a moment, watching them laugh, I almost forgot what it felt like to live in fear. The sunlight came through the curtains just right, soft, gold, forgiving. Daniel sat across from me, the faint scar on his forehead barely visible anymore. He looked alive, not haunted, not running, just alive. Eli kept the conversation light. "You know, Mom, it's weird having dinner without police tape or FBI calls in the background." Lila laughed. "You're lucky. My kitchen still smells like bleach from when I had to fake my own death." Daniel groaned. "Please don't remind me." I smiled, shaking my head. "You 3 talk like this was a movie." Daniel looked at me. It kind of was. I reached for my glass. Except in this one, no one got paid and everyone cried. We all laughed. But underneath it, I felt something shift. The kind of quiet you only earn after surviving something unspeakable. After dinner, Eli turned on the small radio by the window. The news was still covering the fallout: Frost's sentencing, the victims' families, the reforms in medical ethics law. They called it the Hayes case. Every time I heard the name, it felt surreal. Once, it had been the sound of grief. Now, it was the sound of justice. Daniel noticed me looking at the wall behind him. The old sneakers, his sneakers, were hanging there in a wooden frame. The ones I'd worn to ether the day I confronted Frost. I'd kept them like a relic. "You kept those?" he asked softly. I nodded. They reminded me of two things: who you were and who I refused to lose. He didn't say anything, but his eyes said everything. Gratitude, love, maybe guilt. All of it tangled up. Lila broke the silence. "You know, sometimes I wonder if the truth was worth all that." I looked at her. "It always is, but it never comes cheap." She sighed. "Yeah, still, I'd rather live with scars than secrets." Daniel raised his glass. "To scars, then. We all raised ours. To scars." The moment hung there, fragile, warm, full of the kind of peace that doesn't need words. Later that night, after everyone left, I stayed by the table. The plates were still warm from dinner, the smell of garlic and laughter still in the air. I walked to the wall and touched the frame, those old sneakers, cracked and faded, frozen in time. I remembered every version of my son: the boy who used to fix broken radios, the man who uncovered a truth too big for the world to handle, and the one who came back from the dead to finish what he started. For the first time, I didn't see tragedy when I looked at him. I saw resilience. I turned off the lights. And in that brief darkness before the lamp clicked back on, I realized something. Storms don't last. They just remind you what it means to stand. As I sat back down, Eli texted me a photo he'd taken at dinner. All of us mid-laughter, blurred and imperfect. The kind of photo that only exists when no one's trying too hard to be happy. I looked at it for a long time, then whispered to myself, "We made it. No more lies. No more running. Just peace. The kind you build with your own hands, one truth at a time." The interviewer leaned closer and asked, "Mrs. Hayes, after everything you've been through, what do you want people to remember?" I took a deep breath. The cameras, the lights, the polished table, none of it mattered. "They buried my son once with lies," I said quietly. "The second time, I buried my fear." The room went silent. For a long moment, I just looked down at my hands. Older now, worn from holding too much grief. "You see," I continued, "love doesn't end when someone dies. It doesn't even end when truth costs you everything. A mother's love. It begins again every time she refuses to give up." When the interview ended, the producer asked if I wanted to record a final statement for the documentary. I looked straight into the camera and said, "A mother's love doesn't end at the grave. It begins where fear dies." Later that night, the broadcast went live. Messages poured in, from strangers, from mothers I'd never met, from people who said they'd lost faith in justice until they heard my story. But this isn't about me. It's about what love can survive. If your mother knew the truth could destroy her, would she still choose to tell it? Tell me what you think in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe if you believe some truths are worth dying for.